What is poppin' gamers? Back again with another quickie on a maybe possibly unexpected game. Maybe not your first thought when you think of 2000's beach gen games, but this I would argue this is quintessential beach generation 2000's vibes. It's Tsukihime. Or
Woo!
Tsukihame as, as you as you might I think that is the correct way to say it, right, Al?
Opening for you guys today. We got the Tsukihame? I think I killed that shit. I'm not gonna lie, but we got the Tsukihame remake.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah. This is our first one-on-one, just a really sexy, intimate little boy chat.
Oh yeah,
The
fitting
right,
for the subject matter.
yeah, yes, exactly. Alan, I think you have a tendency to be like really hyper fixated on stuff that you enjoy,
Yes,
and
yes.
this was a big hyper fixation, right?
Yeah, so I guess it was right before Type Lumina launched, which would have been fall 2021. I think September 30th. And I was like, I want to play something I had no interest in. So I downloaded Tsukihime, the original, of course. I guess remake was out in Japan at that point, but I downloaded Tsukihime, and I think by the end of the year, I was already working on retranslating its sequel, and I had a couple hundred hours in Melty Blood. So this hit like a bus. It's not exactly the kind of game you'd be into normally, though. So, is there a story behind why you play it?
I played it purely as a gag. So it was this game. So as far as like big VN discourse in our bubble, it was this game versus the House and Fata Morgana. That was before Kendrick versus Drake. This was the big beef, okay, of our time. And I guess I'm not gonna talk about Fata Morgana too much, but like it was always told to me as like, ooh, this is like very um this like very artsy, elegant, beautiful story about love and acceptance and all that stuff. And Tsukihime, you look for 2 seconds at it, and it looks very. I don't mean it's a derogatory way, but it looks sort of trashy, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like it doesn't look very. It's very obviously not highbrow, and uh, I played Fata Morgana sort of sincerely, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. And then I was like, okay, wouldn't it be hilarious if I played Tsukihime and I liked it more? And then I played it for a little bit as like sleep aid. That's one of our other big memes that, oh shit, a game as sleep aid is so valuable actually. Uh, and Tsukihime was that for me for like the first couple weeks that I chipped away at it. I thought, okay, this is insanely poorly translated. It looks really janky. It's very meandering. But then at some point, the game overcame its own meme. The meme took on a life of its own, and it as I got deeper into it, it became sort of sincere, and I actually stuck through to the end. And I saw the one like the true ending or whatever.
Yeah. To be clear, he saw the Arcway true ending.
Yeah,
I have played the whole thing and seen all the bad endings, even. But yeah.
that's a lot. I actually yeah, I didn't the game has a whole I guess this is sort of the classic VN trope that you make some random kind of off-kilter choices, and then you get a I guess the closest parallel, I'm sorry to be a West taboo, but dying in a LucasArts adventure game, it's sort of like that, where you do something a little weird and unexpected, and then the designers or the developers are like, fuck you, try again. Tsukihime has a
I
lot of those.
Yeah, and that kind of There are other games from Type Moon which handle this kind of stuff better. This is their first visual novel. Back when they were still a doujin group. Everyone nowadays will recommend you play this game with a guide. And they'll do that for basically every other Type Moon game too, but I think it's less applicable from Kagetsu Toya onwards. But I don't know anybody who has played this game completely blind without a guide, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And not that it would be super hard. The game has a bunch of features like letting you skip scenes you've already seen. It keeps track of that. Actually, and there's a good fast forward feature, and you can have like 20 save slots or something like that. So it's not like super unreasonable about it, but the choices don't feel particularly meaningful, I guess.
Yeah, I will say I did play without a guide, and I didn't, but like I didn't have the expectation that I will stick through it or that I will want to do all the endings. I was happy with the one route that I played, and I I basically at the start I was like, okay, I knew there was multiple routes, and if I'm gonna pursue one, I probably want to do the Arcwait one because it feels like the most sort of thematically appropriate.
She is the Tsukihime.
And I had a couple like the point I was trying to lead into earlier is like I didn't really trigger my first couple bad endings until actually pretty late into my playthrough. And even then, it was pretty easy to avoid that stuff. Once I stumbled into it, I figured out how to route around it. So if you're gonna play it like that, you probably don't need a guide. But if you want to do everything, then yeah. I will say also, I played the new web version that came out recently. That is a pretty convenient way to get into this game, and it runs on a lot of devices. I played on my iPad. So that was, again, the whole sleep aid thing, just reading on my tablet, not deep literature about Tsukihime until my eyes.
You should have played the official by Type Moon GBA port.
Yeah, see, I actually... Wait, is that official?
So it's Type Moon official, it's not Nintendo official.
Okay.
Type Moon partnered with some company that made the thing. There's a Higurashi one as well. A lot of Turn of the Millennium VNs got one.
Is that in English as well?
I doubt it.
See, because I think all these VNs, and maybe we can use this as a launch point for the next topic, but they're sort of written in this I think universal kind of fucking coding language or whatever. It's just mostly text files and then just scripts pointing to, okay, load this background now, whatever. And because these games share so much in common in terms of their skeleton, modders have built apps for the DS, for example, or the PSP, where you can just load those files and then have basically a DS port of Tsukihime. And that actually is how I played it at first, because I thought, oh, funny meme, 2000's, haha. But then I got a little bit into it, and I noticed some of the portraits were just unreasonably stretched.
Yeah.
I mean, it was sort of funny, but I thought, you know what, we don't have to take the meme that far.
Tsukihime does not need any help with its visuals.
So fucking true. Yeah, I'm looking through our notes, and I guess maybe we have this sort of at the end, but I think maybe this would be a good time to bring up now. I guess the climate of VNs at the time and adventure games in general. So obviously Tsukihime is a visual novel, and I guess for me, I'm a big Nintendo normie, right? Earthbound is the best JRPG. Paper Mario is the best JRPG type guy, and being that, my first exposure to this type of game was stuff like the Ace Attorney series, Hotel Dusk, 999 later on would be much closer to, like, if in my mind, to what a pure VN kind of is. I guess the adventure game and the visual novel spectrum, you can look at it sort of as a spectrum. Alan, do you have thoughts on that?
So I kind of come from a similar background.
Yeah.
I play a lot of like text-heavy JRPGs. So you think I would have hit upon this approach earlier, but I was just happy when the Fate anime came out, so I never decided to read the VNs when I was younger.
People die when they are killed.
So Yeah, yeah. So I Ace Attorney would be like the first adjacent thing I played. I love that first game. It's awesome. I think I played 999 after Tsukihime actually. So
Yeah.
Suki was definitely my first big boy VN, I guess. Um, but you know, there's kind of these two. They overlap in a lot of design sensibilities, adventure games and VNs, to the point where there's endless semantic internet arguments over which counts as what game counts as which. But I think it's the history wise, they're even probably more overlapped back in the day, and maybe that's because language hadn't clearly made distinctions between them. You know, that might have changed how people thought about them. But you have stuff. You have like dating sims in that mix as well, which are kind of their own thing, but also overlap with both of those other categories. But even adventure games back then, unless they were coming from the handful of Western studios that were doing them, are very anime. Uh, you have stuff like Tokimeki Memorial's a dating sim, but it's very much in that anime oeuvre. You know, Phoenix
Yeah.
Wright would come out, I think, a year after Tsukihime, and it's very anime. And I think Tsukihime, being a Dojin game, so an indie game, is just what it should be called. Dojin doesn't have the other implications that of the way we use it in the West. Although I guess they are applicable here. Anyways, um, being a Dojin game in that sort of anime climate, everything about Tsukihime is kind of derivative of that environment, I guess. You know, it's not the first thing to subvert anime tropes. They've been being subverted as long as they have been tropes. But Tsukihime is definitely kind of founded in that spirit, I guess.
Yeah, I will say I talked about 999 a little bit earlier. I think my first exposure to again pure VN was Steins Gate, and
Yeah.
I I I bring that up because I had this association in my head with, okay, there it seems like there's very few pure VNs that don't have some sort of dating slant somehow. That don't like where well you mentioned Tokimeki Memorial, and that's a dating sim because it has like actual simulation mechanics. But then I feel like I know I can think of so many uh pure VNs where the different routes that you can embark on are always sort of associated with some girl that you want to pursue.
So that's kind of an interesting thing to get into. The uh you know, any famous first that is credited for doing something first probably isn't. If you look a little back in history, you'll find something else that did it as well, or kind of.
Yo.
Um, Tsukihime is the big thing people point at as like every root is a different woman, uh,
Mm,
and that is not exactly true as the first, but you can trace a bunch of lines in that context, I guess, back to Tsukihime is the best way of thinking about it.
interesting. Because when I played Steins Gate, I was like, "Whoa, this is like sort of subversive, actually." Because I, I, because I was a dumb like fucking 16-year-old, you know, and
Yes.
I didn't even have a frame of reference for what other dating sims or other VNs are like. I just thought, wow, this is like, you know, it's not you're not just dating these girls. It's like, ooh, there's a little more to it. And hmm, I
I
guess.
think
Oh yeah, go ahead.
like lexically, if you want to make the distinction, these games that don't really have simulation-y elements,
Yes.
like affection scores and like time mechanics and stuff like that, uh, are best just thought of as romance visual novels as opposed to dating sim ones, maybe.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's my perspective on it, anyways.
I definitely get that. Do you ever play this is totally uh just coming to me on the spot. Do you ever play Saya no Uta?
No, but I was very exposed to Sayano Uda just by existing in the online spaces I did at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I think that that was another one that I very randomly heard about, and I was just too intrigued by the fucked up premise that I could not tear myself away from it. this is not an endorsement of that game. Seek it out at your own risk. I guess that is one that did inform my perspective of VNs a lot, right? Where
Yeah.
okay, I had I see. I mean, that game, it doesn't have the multi-route, multi-girl thing going on, but it is a very sexual game, and I guess there is always the uncomfortable sort of association with okay, all these VNs are trash, incest. I don't know if I want to say the R word out loud. I don't know, but
Yes.
like if you like, I think it's really easy to be really reductive about these games, and then have those instant associations in mind, and then maybe even to the point where it gets into joke territory, right? Where you don't
Yeah.
even want to take it seriously. And I guess Tsukihime is sort of a poster child for that a little bit.
It kind of ties back to what we were talking about a second ago. So VNs are kind of known at this point for doing weird three sets of quotes, subversive, like edgy stuff
Yeah.
with women in various ways. And that is a trend in Nasu's work. And Tsukihime inspired Ryukishi, I think that's his name, right? Ryukishi 7.
Oh yeah.
To create Higurashi, which also has some of that stuff in it. And so these two big pivotal works come out around the turn of the millennium, and they've got weird women stuff. And so it kind of ripples into everything from there. Everybody's inspired by these two guys. One of them is inspired by the other. So Tsukihime is kind of the first domino in that wave. I guess to get into that a little, Tsukihime is a vampire story. Some of you might not know that. It kind of is preceded by Fate Stay Night, which is not one in like cultural consciousness. So its premise is a little more simple than Fate Stay Night. It is a pretty traditional vampire story, and so it engages with sexuality a lot.
Yeah.
And you will find every range of opinion on that topic, from like very, very juvenile takes on it, in that like, oh, you can say anything, so anything should be okay to say, to very, I guess, Puritan takes on it is how I describe it, and that like this kind of stuff should never be in anything ever. I don't think I fall really in either direction on that, but I'm curious how you feel about it.
Yeah. I guess I maybe to sell this more to a very, again, Nintendo poisoned beach gen classic audience. The premise of this game is you I hesitate to say you take control of the protagonist because like I mean it's at the end,
Yes.
right? But you get what I'm saying. The protagonist of the story is this boy named Shiki. He has a very impactful car accident that does fucked up things to his vision, which by the way that is a parallel to Sayanuta randomly. I'm thinking of that.
Oh, huh.
And but like he sort of gets on with his life, and he meets this girl Arquette who turns out to be a vampire, which is I think very classic parallel to even more modern vampire stories like fucking Twilight, where
Yes, yeah.
normal person will come into contact with this other world that was kind of always there, but they were not aware of it, and that has
Mhm.
this natural kind of lore, and also this sense of danger as well, and that's what Shiki kind of gets thrown into, and through that, we kind of explore his maybe violent nature and how that could be a parallel with sexuality.
Yes.
Like when you again, so this game never came out in the West officially. We're gonna talk about the remake a little bit later, which that is the first time any sort of variant of this game has ever been available in English, as far as I'm aware of. But
Yes.
there's a fan translation, and it's not the best. I'm not saying this as a dunk toward the people who made it, but the production quality of this game is pretty pretty budget. The translation is not very good. It's and like it has this I forget if I already said this, but like it has this pretty meandering tone when it kind of gets going. It's very slice of lifey. You see Shiki kind of go through his day by day at the school. There's like one section where he's at the food court with his homie, and he'll like repeatedly say, "Ah, I lean back in my chair as I chow down on my was it shirataki udon?" Like, I'll chow down on my shirataki udon. He says this, and as I slurp on my shirataki udon, I contemplate what he just said as I slurp on my shirataki udon. Like, it's it's so weirdly repetitive sometimes with the phrasing. Um, so I think your first instinct is to not take this game very seriously. At least that's
Yes.
kind of how it was for me. Um, but yeah, as I said earlier, I did sort of see. Oh no, there's like a theme here. There's an actual attempt at a story here, and it's not actually. It's actually actually has merit, which kind of shocked me.
um, yeah. The classic theme that is flagged up very early, like even earlier than meeting Arquaid, is like the fragility of life, of anything.
Yep.
You mentioned his eyes earlier. For people, I guess it helps to explain it a little bit. Basically, he can see lines on everything, and if he cuts those lines, which is very easy for him to do, the thing dies. And so you have the main juxtaposition that makes the story work on this Arquaid route, at least, is that you have this immortal vampire who is very weak for circumstantial reasons, and you have this anemic, like fragile boy who is very strong for circumstantial reasons.
Yeah.
And I think it flags that up early enough to like. There is a lot of slice of life junk at the start, and I like slice of life junk, but I think it flags that up early enough to be like at least a little interesting. You're like, where is this going?
Yeah. I again for me I did genuinely play it with the intent of like, okay, I need to close my eyes now. Give me some light entertainment before bed. And I guess yeah, I think my experience is sort of rare and that I wasn't really hooked on it early on, and that I think that's why I have a hard time really recommending it to people. But at the same time, it did sort of work by the end. I was very, and you're gonna see this in the title of the video as well. Like, I was actually sort of sincerely charmed by it. I guess there's also the element of how, and you know, depends on how deep we want to get into the actual specifics of the plot. But as the story kind of gets more dramatic, the the way the game handles more kind of violent or shocking moments is gonna be very like the way you respond to it is gonna be very different from person to person. And like personally, I have a very hard time being offended, right? And I guess Alan, like, how deep do you want to get into this? Like, do you have? I know you broached it a little bit earlier, but like, do you have thoughts on that?
I don't think we should get in like super into to the specifics of the plot because
Yeah.
and I'm not. You beat the game, but there's so much of the plot and the context that is in the other four routes that is like a discussion of that could be interesting, just like your perspective on Arquaid route. But you saw the majority of like the types of stuff Tsukihime shows, so I guess addressing those. So it is a like kind of classic vampire fiction thing. There's lots of sexuality and violence and sexual violence in Tsukihime. And so it is very hard to recommend to people. And a lot of that stuff, there are some solid arguments for why it's not done the best, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess my perspective on it ended up being It's like I'm like a big vampire guy. I like those kind of stories. I don't think I actually knew Tsukihime was a vampire story before I started it. Funnily, my perspective on it was kind of not that it was par for the course for the genre, because like I recognized bad anime, hentai, I guess.
How to recognize bad anime in just one episode?
Yeah. I recognize that this was like a slightly different flavor than like the sexuality present in Dracula or something. But I was not personally very offended by it, and I think there's a bit more substance to at least the context of those moments than people are willing to give it credit for. But I think maybe the reason this stuck with people so much is that Nasu kind of has a way for writing horrific stuff that is, of course, marred by translation and presentation here. But like, the first encounter with Arcwade, for example, is like it kind of sticks in your brain.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I recall there's like when you first encounter her, there's a specific set of choices that you can make to basically offend her a little bit, and I was kind of shocked how much I felt kind of threatened, you know, in that moment. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
The way the mood kind of switched was very unique. I think that is something I can, as much as I'm experiencing the writing through this, you know, English filter, like that is something you can definitely tell that he has a certain knack for conveyance. And I'm not sure if it's there's sort of an element of like repetition and being very explicit with Shiki's thoughts as well. That I wouldn't classify as like super elegant or anything, but I guess it's a game. This is gonna sound bad. I'm sorry, but like it's not afraid to be a little bit cringe. And
Yeah.
Honestly, that is a quality that sometimes I can be a little half and half on. I think sometimes we give things too hard of a pass for just being quote unquote sincere.
Mhm.
But in this case,
I think
oh yeah, go ahead.
it like it broaches some things. It uses its cringe to do some stuff that it maybe couldn't do without it.
Yes.
And that makes the cringe bearable. And I guess I should have flagged this up earlier, or maybe I did. I have had to read in Japanese both this and its sequel because I did translation work on the sequel, and like it is an unenviable task to adapt this stuff. But a lot of the qualities that are kind of intrinsic, the repetition, for example, is like the big one everyone brings up. That is present in the Japanese too. That is not exactly a fault of the translation. It is exacerbated in some places, but like it is very much a Nasu thing more than a.
That's a
I forget the
quirk,
localizer's name. Yeah.
I guess maybe I have one thought on the just sexually explicit nature of the game in general, and that's I think so. If you're familiar with the Type Moon trajectory release history of some of their stuff, you'll know that for Fate Stay Night, for example, there were re-releases of that game where they outright just removed the sexual content. And I don't know how well the story functions without it, personally. I will say in this game, like, I think, again, you're very naturally inclined to slot it in the hentai fucking trash category of game. And I don't think that's too unfair in some respects. It does have, for example, it does have the classic CG viewer in the main menu, so you can view all the most pivotal scenes, including all the saucy bits, right? And I don't know, there's sort of a cultural element to that, to like, ooh, like, let me look up the hentai CG for this game. Like, that feels weird to say, but yeah. The game is very much in that vein, and yet I will make the argument that the presence of sex in it is not a perfunctory thing. It's not It's not something you can just turn off and then the story will kind of function the same. Um, the the entire construction around those scenes tells you, okay, this is like very explicit. This is very much part of the theme here.
I guess you could kind of say they're having their cake and eating it too.
Yeah.
um, I guess without getting into it too much, I think the best example of this is kind of what Tsukihime does is actually with Akiha, the main character's sister. And I'm not going to get too much into details because you haven't played her route, and it'd be kind of boring to get into. But every Tsukihime character is at once a like very thoroughly considered character who is like basically the way I think they wrote it is they took all the tropey anime girls that people liked. You've got the cold one, the bubbly one, the little sister, the senpai, and the older woman. Arcwade being the older woman, and she's also kind of the manic pixie dream girl, whatever. I think they took all those tropes and they were like, in the context of this vampire story, what sort of life experiences lead someone to acting that way? And so over the course of the roots, you get to understand the character in a kind of natural way. You get to know a person. So like, why does Akiha have a thing for her brother is like kind of a basic question that is core to her root. So the story is exploring that while also giving you the little sister character, if that's your thing, I guess.
Yeah, and if that's your thing, maybe contact like a therapist,
yeah. But you couldn't remove that and it be like the same. It wouldn't be about the same thing anymore.
Yes.
In a more approachable way, it's like, why is Arcwade kind of ditzy? And it's like, oh, she's lived this life as a weapon as opposed to a human being.
Yeah.
It's weird where like there's a lot of misogyny inherent to it, I think. Just the kind of objectification and stuff. But then the writing will be a little more nuanced than you expect for something like that, and it kind of disarms you. You're like, well, what?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get the ire of like every Fata Morgana fan, but on me. But I did feel it was kind of surprising how in Tsukihime the women do have agency. They and like it feels like fan praise, feels like a low bar, right? But they do express their thoughts. They clearly have an inner life. It doesn't feel entirely like, obviously it's a very male gazy game, but it doesn't feel like it's coming totally at the cost of a female perspective. And again, playing this back to back with Fata Morgana, where seemingly the entire point of that game is like, ooh, it's a patriarchal society, man. What do you expect? So I don't know. I guess this goes back to what we said about the cringe factor, where I think this game, it just figured out the perfect formula. I can't put it any other way. It's like, it's somehow, at least to me, it's so shamelessly like reveling in its meme that it's almost immune from criticism from my end. If that makes any sense. Yeah. It's the quantum vision level.
Yeah. And I guess to get a little bit on the remake, I don't want to focus on it too much. I've only played a bit of it. As of recording, it only came out like a week ago, I think. The sex scenes are removed, but sex is still a present object of the story.
Okay.
And the way Nasu writes women, this kind of objectifying but still nuanced way, I guess. It's kind of like he's writing how a guy observes real women, if that makes sense.
Honestly, that makes perfect sense.
It's something he only ever got better at, I think. Fate Stay Night has like a super impactful scene in its first route, and as I'm playing Tsukihime right now, and there's a lot of like clear consideration of that angle. It feels a lot more in the remake, maybe because it's just better presented, that these kind of male gazy aspects of it are something you're seeing because it's something Shiki is seeing.
Yeah.
And I do think that angle is kind of present in the original.
Guys, seeing his vision is fucked up. Glasses, seeing male gaze. Get it?
We're doing like a word connection game. Real eyes, real lies.
Oh
shit!
See, I was in America for 3 months, and I took a psychology and film class, and one of the films we looked at was Halloween, and Halloween is sort of the origin of the male gaze, literally, because it starts with this first-person scene of the serial killer Michael Myers, being basically activated by the like sexual promiscuity of his sister and then murdering her, right? Like the fact we see it from this literal first-person view, like from the mask, is where the person that wrote the essay on it, where she got the term male gaze from, and like I guess that is sort of interesting. This is I'm getting off track a little bit, but like I guess it does make me think about the use of like glasses, or like the idea of seeing through things or whatever as a storytelling motif, that could apply to Tsukihime.
Yeah, and there's definitely some interesting stuff with that in later routes as well. You're probably gonna get a little cooked in the comments. I'm gonna warn you now, because any diehard old head Tsukihime fan is like, they like Arcwade route and they like CL route, where they're collectively called the near side routes. But the far side routes, which is Akiya, Hisui, and Kohaku, those are like the things that people get excited about. There's a lot of I don't really agree with that perspective. I think my favorite route in the game is still Arcwade's.
She's best girl, bro. White sweaters, bro. White sweaters,
bro. She's also just like genuinely like fun to talk to. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about the script being kind of a product of a early 2000s fan translation, but I still think they do a good job at kind of conveying character dynamics. I don't think the translation is great, but I think it is worth seeing Tsukihime through that, because a bunch of its best qualities are still evident, even if a little obfuscated, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess it is a product of its time, to the point that it's sort of also kind of intellectually interesting, I would say.
Yeah, there's a Chris Chan reference in it. I think there's two 9/11 jokes in the fan translation.
So sick, dude. Me looking at the TV in 2001.
Holy shit!
Yeah. Oh man.
So how do you feel about the localization in the remake so far?
Okay, so I have lamented over fucking the way Kinoko Nasu writes for many moons. It took me, I think, about a year to finish that retranslation of Kagetsu Toya, and I'm still not happy with it, and I don't think I could ever be happy with it. He writes in a way that feels inconveyable, and to a certain extent, anyone's writing translated is not their writing anymore.
Yes, I agree with that.
His feels particularly like, man, this would read like dog shit in any other language. And the approach remake seems to have taken is to not make it outside of character dialogue, which is a little more translatable than like Shiki's internal monologue, because it's a little more conversational, obviously. Outside of that, it feels like they've made the decision to. It still reads like it is translated from Japanese, but there's clearly a lot of care put into making sure it reads well regardless. So like you'll see sentence structures that are Japanese in nature, but they've been, I guess, spruced up. And I think that was the best way they really could have handled it. As not these Nasuvians have gone on, they've done more and more weird stuff with their text and like the way it is presented. And a lot of that is very dependent on Japanese. Famously, he didn't want his games to be translated for a long time until he was certain someone could do a good job of it. And the Mihoyo localization that got put out before this wasn't very good, so I didn't have high hopes. But I would say I'm genuinely like really positive on it so far. They've made his language approachable enough without diminishing like much of its unique quality.
That is sort of surprising. I guess that it does intrigue me as a way to like, obviously it's not the same game as the original, but to maybe get closer to that experience, to what the Japanese script would have been in a slightly different format. That does sort of intrigue me. Maybe in a couple of years I'll hop on.
It is a kind of it makes a good companion piece for the original.
Yeah. Which that is a unique reason for a remake to be like valuable or valid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Cause like
it's funny because this is kind of like the FF7R of VNs. It's like
my god, dude.
They've been talking about it, I think, since 2008 or something like that.
Jesus Christ.
Because I mean, you think about the trajectory of this company. They put out Tsukihime, and it is a niche cult hit. They put out its sequel, which they wrote in a month, and it's like it does pretty well because people like Tsukihime. And then they put out Fate Stay Night, and they forever changed the face of modern anime and otaku culture. Like, so they were immediately like, maybe we could do a little more of that Tsukihama thing. But
that is a good segue actually, because obviously Type Moon now has a lot of has a weird level of cultural cachet due to sorry, keep up my mic. Due to Fate. I think my first exposure to anything Type Moon was Fate Zero, which is the
same here.
Yeah, was it 2011 or 12 or?
I think it's 2012.
2012 anime. It's a prequel to Fate Stay Night.
Yes, and they're adapted from visual novels written, or not visual novels, novels written by the Sayano Uda guy. Fun fact.
yeah. Which. Honestly, Fate Zero as I think if you're Fate diehard, maybe you have some fucking feelings about it. Whatever. I thought as a standalone anime, as a like little respectable piece of storytelling, it was actually pretty, like self-contained and enjoyable at the time. It almost felt it was like a normal story that you could like watch. Yeah.
You just couched that in like 30 qualifiers, and if Fate hands get a hold of this video, they're still gonna cook you for that. Yeah. Yeah, Fate Zero is my first exposure as well.
Shit, awesome. Alan, I was saying to you earlier that the again the cultural cachet of Fate is like sort of weird because there's the mobile game Fate Go, right, which I've never played. I don't know much about it, but I just know it's put many people in the West into debt. I'm always imagining it as, okay, this is like, I've never looked deep into it, but like this is probably the biggest thing since sliced bread. This is a huge fucking IP. Except it is still very nerd weeb specific. It has absolutely zero footprint with normies. And I think even for nerdy things, that is sort of uncommon. That really intrigues me about it. That weird dichotomy there.
Trixie the Golden Witch first put the thought in my head of the way anime and its culture is kind of fractionalized. Every studio is counting on like 100 super fans to fund their show, basically, to buy all the merch and da. So so unless it's like your shonen of the week or your like really your handful of really high production value projects, they're very niche inherently. They're focusing on like super otaku, and I was thinking about it, and it's like Fate is the project, or Type Moon in general is kind of the project that hits all of those smaller otaku clusters. Like it ropes them all in. So it is like as immensely popular as it can be in those niche cultures, and does not break out much outside of that. It's an interesting space to be in, and we were talking about this earlier. It has led to like kind of a undue maybe market influence that Type Moon stuff has. Good Smile, the company that makes Nendoroid and Figma, they were basically spawned as a Type Moon merch company. The first Nendoroid is Neko Arc.
Oh my god, that's awful.
Kinoko Nasu casually mentioned that Ufotable only, they existed before Type Moon stuff, but a lot of their breakout work was on the Kara no Kyokai movies for Type Moon. Nasu casually suggested to them that they should look into Demon Slayer, and you saw what happened there. But it's really interesting in this era. You mentioned Fate Go. Fate Go, I think Type Moon or Fate, the franchise, is among like the 50 most profitable franchises ever, and 15/16 of that is from the mobile game Fate Go.
Yeah. See, I didn't know those numbers, but I sort of figured like it doesn't feel like it's huge, but it has to be huge.
Yeah.
They just cracked the code with Saber specifically, I think. I think
they just put Saber, that one character design, in fucking Dark Souls, or sorry, Elden Ring. I don't know if you saw that tweet about that.
What was the guy's name that does cool gifts? Suini Legends. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I still need to hop on, dude. But instead of talking about Tsukihime.
Yeah, I guess to get back to Tsukihime instead of Fate. Tsukihime, when I read it, I found it kind of archaeologically interesting. And that I felt like I was getting to the root of so much of contemporary weeb culture that I was familiar with. Like, I had seen the Unlimited Blade Works anime, and I think one of the Heaven's Feel movies. And then I went back to watch this, and I went back to play this, and I was like, oh, Saber is just Arcwade and Hisui in one character. Sakura is just like Kohaku and Seal. Like there's very, very, very clear parallels. And Fate Stay Night is probably like one of the most important things to anime culture ever.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff on that list, but if you're interested in that culture, I think it's worth going back and reading Tsukihime as well.
Yeah. Again, it's like, I think you have to embrace the schlock a little bit. You have to embrace. I guess, as I got old, I was thinking about this recently as well, like, as a more general thing. As I got older, I think I'm way more open again to, like, quote-unquote lowbrow media, because I think, so for those who are listening, you may know this video that Alan put out recently about how Edge is cool on his channel, that I helped on as well. And I think there's something you can just tap into uniquely from that type of perspective, from that like really unpretentious perspective, that is very valuable and very compelling. And I think, again, as with everything in life, just having a diverse diet of experiences is always great. I know I can't believe I'm saying this, but I am glad that I played Tsukihime, because like it.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing you admit at the end of the podcast. Like after everybody tunes off already. Yeah. Like you boot up the game and you hear the crusty ass piano, like dun, dun, dun.
Oh, dude,
it's too good.
I think I might have the realest Stockholm syndrome ever for the Tsukihime OST. I really like 6 of the 10 tracks.
I feel like honestly, sincerely, this game did take me back to like I didn't grow up with this type of game, right? But it still sort of has a power to transport you to that time. Like
Yeah, yeah.
like when I see Tsukihime, I also see all those like all those 2000's aesthetics fucking Twitter accounts where it's a 2000's bedroom with like a little yellow iPod on the desk and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
some
yeah.
funky speakers. That's just the vibe. And if you like that vibe, if you're a beach gen person, uh consider hopping on. I don't know.
And it is a bit of a fall game, not exactly very summery. So you
Oh,
might
that's
want to
true.
wait till it yeah, you might want to wait till it cools down a little, but yeah, you could probably farm quite a few likes by posting the title screen on like your like a Windows 98 machine you have lying around.
So sick.
It is a quintessential vibe.
Yes. Alan, do you have anything else you want to get into?
I guess the only thing I really want to say is back about that the topic of sexuality.
Yeah.
You will not lose anything if you fast forward once the sex itself starts most of the time. But if you have a Twitter account, which you probably do if you're watching this, you probably see worse on your timeline regularly. Yeah. So, and like if you can't hang with this stuff, that's fine. That's cool. Do you? But I would encourage you, if this is the kind of a thing you're not a fan of, but it doesn't actively like hurt you to look at or something, give it a shot. Just not the VN in general, that is. And find your own way to work through it.
Yeah.
If you've got to fast forward the scenes, go for it, do it. But I think despite the face Tsukihime wears, the way it presents to you, it is still very much worth reading, and I highly recommend it.
The cringe won't kill you.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's my message for
Absolutely.
the day. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, I in the current episode that should be up by the time that you're seeing this as well. I mentioned we have at least 2 funny, really obscure things coming up on the channel that might kill us, that might kill the channel. Tsukihime was the first one. Look forward to the next thing. It's gonna be even more random. Okay. Well, we're signing off. This is goodbye for me. Bye bye, guys. Bye bye.
Later.